Go ahead and get started.
Okay.
The meeting of the Mesa Community Plan Update Advisory Committee, subcommittee to the Mesa Community Plan Group. I have not received any requests for non-agenda public comment, so Alex, you can go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. Alex Frost, project manager for the Mira Mesa Community Plan Update. I was going to quickly go over the schedule and some of the community input highlights from the Mobility Board meeting and Planning Commission workshop and Park and Rec Board primarily, and then next steps and discussion. So in terms of schedule, July was pretty busy. We went to the Mobility Board. This was an info item just to share the community discussion draft and some of the contents related to mobility. And we had a Planning Commission workshop, the third one, to go over the discussion draft on July 21st, and then Park and Rec Board on the same day in the afternoon to go over parks and recreation related items. And today's meeting is community input on discussion draft, some of the highlights, and there is another SB 52 or AV 52. It's a cultural tribal consultation. So we are scheduling that for August. And then the next meeting will be the Historic Resource Board. This will be an info item on the historic context statement and neighborhood reconnaissance survey. We are planning to release the draft community plan and draft program EIR first week of September. And I will come back to this committee in September 19th, just to go over these documents and in the school analysis at that time. Finally, we'll be going back to Park and Rec Board and Mobility Board for action item, followed by Airport Land Use Commission in October. And that's the 45-day period for the final draft and final program EIR comments. So we should have that early October, and hope to go to the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group for a recommendation, followed by Historic Resource Board action item in October 27th, and then Planning Commission, Land Use and Housing Committee, and City Council in November, December timeframe. So this is our 30th meeting, and we've had 9 events now and 4 opportunities for online engagement and stakeholder interviews. Multiple technical studies and documents has been presented to this group. And I want to focus on 2 new documents, historic context statement and focused reconnaissance survey. These are 2 info items for the Historic Resource Board, and it's available at the link down on the slide. So it is available. And in terms of community input, just moving on and sharing some of the highlights. So discussion draft contains the community vision, goals, policies, maps, and figures. And it provides an opportunity for community input. And I've received over 100 comments. It's probably more than 200 now. A lot of emails as well. But in terms of this kind of high level community input, I think one of the biggest concern is growth without adequate infrastructure and a need for more public facilities such as larger parks, recreation, aquatic centers, libraries, and schools. Also a need for more mobility investment to serve a new population, and a concern about lack of future funding to fund these investments. a lot of these are outside the purview of community plan update, but we did follow up on parks related item, and our park planner was able to assess and do additional scan of potential properties for acquisition, or that's city-owned land that could be converted to parklands. And so this is some of the highlights. I think the biggest follow-up was there's a city parcel off Kaya Cristobal, and also by Zapata Avenue and Blythe Road, right across from the Sandberg Elementary Neighborhood Park, which is city-owned property that could be converted into a parkland in the future. So we'll have a list of these potential parcels added to the plan. The acquisition piece obviously is going to be challenging. Some of these lands are very expensive. But I think, the 6650 West Boulevard, so that was an old decommissioned helipad as part of the Water Ridge development. So that parcel, I think, has a potential for some kind of reuse, more of a pocket park sort of use. So this was a major follow-up related to lack of parklands here. In addition, some of the other comments, especially from this group, the big one was lack of proposed transit routes in neighborhoods near Sorrento Valley Boulevard, Kaya Cristobal, and northern segment of Camino Ruiz. Concern about forecasted vehicular congestion on major arterials due to future development and prioritization of non-auto modes. We have been getting some requests to refine the figures, policies, and supplemental development regulations, and then clarification related to the population forecast, Series 13 versus Series 14. And I will touch on that, at least in terms of lack of transit. So yellow box here, just highlighting a new neighborhood electric vehicle line, just to be able to connect some of these residential areas to future activity hubs. So this has been added, and it will be shown in the draft plan. And then in terms of the
Alex,
forecast,
just before you go on, I didn't understand what that was that you had on Kaya Cristobal, Sorrento Valley Boulevard. What is that? Blue dots?
it's a neighborhood electric vehicle. It's kind of like a neighborhood shuttle or a circulator that could connect some of the residences here to the villages, future villages.
Okay.
So this would not be, city funded projects per se. It's probably more privately operated. The one example is Fred downtown. It's a electric kind of shuttle circulator that you could call up, and then they'll come pick you up. And that's, I think, Downtown Partnership operates that, but similar sort of concept. Yeah.
Would it be limited only to that area, Alex, which has the blue dots?
To fulfill the gap, but obviously, it could be operated in Miramar, as needed, I suppose. So there is a separate policy that we've also included in the updated plan. So that will be reflected as well for the future if it's other parts of the community that could utilize something similar.
I would think, yeah, that the eastern end where there is a heavy concentration of residential
Mhm.
separated from all these commercial areas, would be a high need area for this.
Mhm. Just noted on that. Okay, so and moving on, in terms of the population, so forecast, initially we were using the Series 13 forecast, which was outdated already. The base year was 2012, which is based on the calibration for the 2012 year. So Sandag updated their regional forecast to Series 14, so that this data became available to the city of San Diego. So this was what we were incorporating, the Series 14, so Sustainable Communities Strategies. This was the regional forecast that was used for the adopted regional plan. So it was adopted in 2021. But after a couple discussions and going back and forth, we settled on using the Series 14 baseline forecast. There isn't a huge difference, but you can see that the vacancy rate for multifamily is a lot
Can I
less.
see you for a second?
Yeah. Dorothy, we can hear you.
What's up?
Dorothy, can you mute your,
I don't see my icon oh, okay.
all right. So after talking with Jeff and going over with the Sandag demographer, basically we've set on the Series 14 baseline assumptions, and this is what's now publicly available as well on the data surfer. So the population has been refined again to 144,300 about. So this is just an update. You can see that the vacancy rate really can increase or decrease future population forecast. So just wanted
Well,
to
Alex, we
update
had
on that.
some email back and forth on this.
Yeah.
I think this is reasonable for the new housing that's being added. The thing that still puzzles me a little is they're also anticipating quite a shrinkage of the existing population down to, I mean, basically it says we can absorb all of Stone Creek, and at the end of that time, by 2050, we'll have the same population as without it. So I'd still like to see a little more detail on what their justification for that is.
Mhm. So I've added a documentation and a link to the regional growth forecast for the baseline, which talks about their methodology and some of the assumptions. So that's available here. Okay.
Will you have this on the website within a day or two?
Yes, I can probably have it on the website tomorrow.
Okay.
And moving on, mobility board, some of the key comments. So their comments were more, there was concern about high vehicular speeds. And they really wanted the plan to reinforce low and modest speed limits throughout the community plan area, specifically in the smart corridors or major arterial. And I think the comment was based on making it safer for people walking and biking. So that was a big concern. Also some clarification about bike lanes. So there were several two-way cycle tracks proposed on Miramar Road and Carroll Canyon Road. But that's unobstructed. The south side of Miramar Road is one of the probably the better locations for two-way cycle tracks. So they were okay with that. And also connection to the Sorrento Valley Station and just integration with regional bike network. and finally, implementation of bike boulevards. So a lot of questions about on the parallel routes like Gold Coast, you know, what that might look like. It's the roundabouts, you know, and sort of related to that. So that was the mobility board comments. Overall, they liked the proposal of the discussion draft and the general direction.
So Alex, on the very first thing there yet, are they, I mean, our problem is more with speeds of 0 than with high speeds on those roads. What do they want you to do?
So the smart corridors and the smart street lights, right? It's synchronized lights that could encourage high vehicular travel. So they were concerned about that, and just making sure that Vision Zero, you know, goals and policies were reflected in the plan, which a lot of it is, you know, lower speed limits and trying to encourage that in some of these high speed corridors. Moving on to the Planning Commission workshop on July 21st. So we did have this discussion about the population forecast, and one of the commissioners mentioned that there is the latest 2020 demographic information is available for Mira Mesa through the redistricting process. So I believe that's the census population. So that was 77,935 is the latest population. So we can add this into update the plan to add this information. Also, there are a lot of questions about the Skyway, the aerial gondola utilization and implementation and how that could happen. I know when MTS had the Elevate SD, they had a ballot initiative in 2020. Skyway was part of that kind of program. But with COVID, that initiative was canceled. But in the future, these ballot initiatives would be the potential avenue for the Skyway connection. And there was a lot of discussion about potential fire risks. So there was a concern that the proposed fire station on Camino Santa Fe and Miramar Road, was it too far, you know, to reach the canyons? But one of the commissioners, Commissioner Marlborough, a former fire captain, I believe, said that because of the aerial support now, that if there is any wildfire, you get quick reinforcements citywide. So didn't foresee any issues with the location of the newest fire station. And another comment was about more details about Prime Industrial Flex and an amendment to the general plan on that. And we're still working on that. And finally, ensuring maintenance of future private parks are consistent with the city's current maintenance system. So this was, I have one additional slide related to Pure Water program. So there was some concerns about impact of construction on Miramar Road and you know how that could actually facilitate some of the improvements proposed in this community plan. So we have to reach back out to PUD on this. And also coordination with MCS Miramar. We've been working closely with them and just added a policy as well related to real estate disclosure and noise. And then the rest was about electric bike and scooters and how they fit in with class 1 and class 4 bike lanes and stormwater, how these private parks would maintain stormwater infrastructure build. So these are some of the kind of high level comments from the planning commission. All right. Parks and Rec Board. This again, key comments related to maintenance of various pocket parks. We're proposing overlooking Los Penasquitos Canyon. So another questions, would the maintenance assessment district maintain this, or would it be the city? So there are some discussions related to that. There were also exploring the joint use facility with Miramar College and Mira Mesa High School. And this was related to, additional park facilities or parkland. And there were some discussions that previously there was some sort of joint use agreement with Mira Mesa High School, but the high school grew and that agreement had ended. I don't know the whole history, but there was some discussions related to that, and exploring partnership related to SDG&E easements. We have identified several of the locations related to multi-use path on Miramar College. Actually, that's a SDG&E easement. And finally, the recreation value point system, just exploring ways to differentiate points and information on the land versus amenity components. Again, there was some emphasis at that meeting to better show all the new parkland that's being proposed, part of the plan update. So in terms of next steps, we are incorporating community input to the draft community plan up until end of summer. What I'll do is I'll have just a big table with all the changes. I've been getting a lot of emails, and I think it's just easier to have just one document showing all the replies related to a lot of the comments. So that's what we'll do, and plan to release the draft community plan and program EIR and the technical reports. So September 2nd, first week of September is the target. And then there will be another meeting in September, and then to the CPG for recommendation in October, and hearing start. So we can have some discussions if there's any other input to the discussion draft. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, so Alex, I think you in your first couple of slides there, you did get the most serious concerns we have, particularly with regards to infrastructure and traffic impacts, but I didn't see any solutions to them. Where do we go from here?
We've had the follow-up for at least the parklands and looking at additional parks. In terms of rec center and aquatic center, Mira Mesa is going to be part of the citywide pool of funds to implement. And I know Mira Mesa's in more the priority group for the rec center and aquatic center. So
so the city got rid of the population-based park standards for acreage, but they neglected to do that for rec centers and pools. And so with the new projected population, we should have 5 3/4 rec centers and 3 pools. The thing is, even if we had the money to build them, where would they go? Where would you put them in the plan?
So, yeah, and then I think we've been going back and forth about the, improving the rec center at Mira Mesa Community Park, right? And what was determined, I believe, by the community was that the new rec center would go and be built at the Three Roots Community Park, that location. But that still does not preclude from renovating the existing rec center at the Mira Mesa Community Park.
Yeah,
So,
so we did
yeah.
want a third rec center at the Three Roots Park. That's a good place for it. But that gives us only three recreation centers, plus the small one at Lopez Ridge. Whereas the city standards would be 5 3/4, so 2 to 3 more than that.
Mhm.
Do we just not worry about that, or do we? Are we going to try to find some location for them, or what? How do we
If-
address that?
If there's any suggestions, I'm all ears. Potential future locations beyond what's identified.
Justin, you had your hand up. You got a spot?
I just wonder how Mira Mesa compares to the rest of the city of San Diego. Is a question, right? Because I wonder if all the submarkets or all these, areas are underserved by recreational centers.
Probably.
That's probably gonna play in, right, to the new funding scheme.
Mhm.
Do you know
Yeah.
any answer to that?
Well, I have been saying at other meetings, I think Park and Rec boards, especially the amount of improvements that are proposed in Mira Mesa would be envy of other communities. 17 miles plus of new trails, over 60 acres of new park lands. Some of it's passive parks, but in between, in Carroll Canyon, and then a rec center, and then the new aquatic center coming down the pipeline. So there in all the pocket parks, that's overlook parks. So those will add up, and we'll provide additional amenities. I know it's not like a soccer field or a baseball field, and I know that's kind of Joe's main talking point on that, but land's expensive to find new, so that's a little bit of the context there.
The only time to do this, Alex, is when we do a community plan update. 30 years ago, we did that. We got the community plan that we have now for the population we have does actually meet all of the city standards. And now you're saying, well, it's just too hard to do. So maybe we can do better than that. I see Lil has her hand up.
Yes, I know that Craig and I have driven around Sorrento Valley and we've identified, and I know he sent you a list of potential areas, and I know the town council has sent you potential areas for parks because we have next to no parks in Sorrento Valley. So can't you use some of those suggestions that we have sent you to build up some of the acreage for the plan?
We did look at all of the recommendations. A lot of the parcels are multi-habitat planning area with sensitive habitats that precludes future parklands, or it's outside of the community boundary. So those were some of the challenges. Also in where the Water Ridge townhomes is, there's some private property that could be, it's passively used now as walking dogs, and there's trails. So that's
Sure.
definitely identified as part of the supplemental development regulation to formalize those trails and connections. in some improvements, but
Well, I do know that, we are all undeveloped at some point, and there's, protected habitat, the gnat catchers and everything else. But, all these parks had to go through, the Friends of the Canyon and the city to get them developed, because at one point they were probably in protected areas. So, it like Overlook Park, I know it's small, and we were promised it would get developed when we bought almost 30 years ago, and it's still the same as it was. That would have been a nice little park for, our neighbors. I know we're not going to be able to walk, because Lopez Ridge is from door to door from my house is 2 miles. So, to bring your little kids down there, you're going to have to drive, but at least Overlook Park would be something, and some of the other areas that we identified. So maybe you could take a closer look, or we can, maybe talk about it or drive around and look and see. But I think we already we identified everywhere that we could possibly think of.
Okay, Alex, maybe you can give that another look. Joe? You're muted. There we go.
Yeah, not to run you into the ground, Alex, but planning is supposed to help the community, not hurt it. And when we go from a minus 3,000 points by doubling our capacity to minus 6,000 points, the hurt just gets worse. And those little areas of open space in Mira Mesa, especially like the one by Sandberg Park, we want to put like a community garden there that doesn't even have water availability to it. So all these other places are surrounded by houses, and I guarantee you try to put a security light or something in there, these people who live there are going to raise hell about that. So, Mira Mesa is really struggling. We are short of park space, and the city is not really, this doesn't look like they're doing anything to help us solve this major problem. You can't have people come home from work and go to a pocket park and have a cup of coffee. That is not recreation. Kids need to be out somewhere where they can have fun with their friends, play basketball, football, whatever, anything. But you can't have a piece of land like in Stone Creek that's 10 feet wide and 100 feet long and call that parkland. The city can do that, but that's ludicrous to say that that's going to do anything to benefit anybody other than the squirrels and rabbits. So we really need to come up with areas where we can put in parks to take care of this huge amount of people that are going to be here. We have a huge amount of people now, and we're not taking care of them as it is. So we really need better solutions to what's going on. But Alex, I want to thank you for all your work. You're doing a tremendous job. It's unfortunately you work for the city, but we love you anyway.
Let's see, Jeff Dosick.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Thank you. I want to talk about the mobility. Is this a good time?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So Alex, I had emailed, but I wanted to bring it up for everyone. On page 55 of the mobility report, it says Camino Santa Fe from Miramar Road to Calle Cristobal goes all the way through as a class 2. It does not. It used to, but it does not anymore. From Miramar Road to Camino Santa Fe, there is no bike lane. There's no class 2 bike lane. So part of where I'm going with that, and when I get an answer, is how with 3 routes coming online, I've been riding through Mira Mesa for over 30 years to get to work on my bike. With 3 routes coming online and without this safe route with all these new cars that are going to come onto the road, how do we make this a priority? It says that they're going to become class 4 bike lanes, but it says in the report that they're currently class 2, but it's not. How do we make it a priority? That's really the core question. How do we make it a priority for this to get addressed as number 1 or 2 issue in the Mira Mesa plan, and not just end up for
Let's let
5 or
Alex-
10 years from now?
Just let Alex respond to that.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is Carroll Canyon Road.
No,
is
this
it
is Camino Santa Fe.
Camino Santa Fe going down south, right? That they repaved or restriped the road, and then the class 2, we lost class 2. Is that
Yes,
is that
they
correct?
didn't repave it. It's somewhere along the line, some years
Mhm.
back, it just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And in the report and in some of the maps, it says it's class 2, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with 3 routes coming on, we need for people to be able to get out of their cars, have alternatives to get over to the Blue Line trolley or UCSD. I come through here all the time.
Yeah. So it's definitely the Carroll Canyon Road, extension is a priority. So at least from Camino Ruiz all the way to Carroll Canyon Road, and so Carroll Road and Sorrento Mesa, that will be a new connection that will be bike friendly. But I guess what you're saying is, that connection to University
Miramar.
City. Yeah.
Yeah,
Miramar.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a significant emphasis on, enhancing bike infrastructure. And I think we're making slow, but better progress. So
Well,
yeah.
Okay, so Alex, can you just take this as back with you to see if you can find out what happened to those bike lanes, and if someone could at least come out and repaint them?
Yeah. Jeff had emailed our mobility staff, but I will definitely loop back with Claudia on this.
yeah, and just thank you, Jeffrey. And just have it as the plan goes forward, as it's critical for mobility.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see, Lil, do you still have your hand up, or do you have it up? again?
No, I added it since we switched to mobility. So,
Okay.
but on Sereno Valley Boulevard and then going all the way down east to Cayo Cristobal, where Jeff was talking about with the bike lanes, I ride that all the time, not on a bike, but in my car. And people are constantly not paying attention and texting, and they're going over into the bike lanes. Is there any way, I don't recall if that was part of the mobility, that we could get actually protected bike lanes going all the way down in each direction? So if, bikers can go down Sereno Valley Boulevard, which they do, on our really bad infrastructured roads in Sereno Valley Road and Sereno Valley Boulevard, to hop on Genesee to get to University City. But, it's so dangerous. You see them, they fly down the hill, the bikers, at, 50 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour. And all it takes is a car to pull over and it could knock them out. So if we could have the protected bike lanes, that would at least give people from Mira Mesa going all the way down Cayo Cristobal safe bike access, to try to get to, say, University City. In the meantime, Carroll Road could take years for it to get built. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, so Lil, it is what is being proposed is class 4 cycle track protected bike lanes on both sides for that segment, which
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Which is
So I wasn't sure of
utilized.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Barry,
So I'm just gonna, I guess, relay to you, Alex, the 2 themes I'm hearing from social media, from people who have talked with me, from people who have emailed me, and just see what you can tell us on this. The two concerns seem to be, number one, there's a lot of emphasis in this plan on getting people out of their cars, bike lanes, they're talking about transit routes, but there doesn't seem to be any way in this plan to make that additional transit happen. And I know Jeff and Pam will remember over 10 years ago when I was still a new kid here, we talked about how bad the transit was here. We even had MTS come out and talk to some of us, and it hasn't gotten any better. So with all the emphasis in this plan, with the bike lanes and everything else, and the goal of getting people out of their cars, number one, what can be done in this plan to, I guess, guarantee that transit will become available if some of these multifamily housing and the malls, et cetera, come to being? And the other question I get is, with the rapidly increasing population, we've already got ADUs going up in backyards all over San Diego, all over Mira Mesa. I've passed some that have multi-story, 3 units. I haven't seen anything in our studies about the current standing of the capacity of our water and sewer systems. How are we doing now? And do we have any guarantees we're not going to end up like some places we see where the water systems are falling apart, not able to take up all of this before we start seeing this building? And I know the building of these units, if this plan goes into effect, won't take place until it is cost effective for it to happen. But if it does, the market's changing right now. What guarantees are in place that we're not going to overtax the existing systems?
So the second part of that question, that will be all part of the program environmental impact report. So water supply, sewer capacity. So that should be available to you, that analysis, shortly. In terms of guaranteed transit infrastructure, I think every community would love this. If we can get guaranteed, future investments in infrastructure. What we've done is work closely with MTS and Sandag to make sure, everything is aligned in terms of the regional plan, but we've gone beyond what's in the regional plan and, added, for example, the aerial skyway, the city feels that connection is much more cost effective. So we've included, these components and then work closely with Three Roots and Stone Creek to make sure that the transit infrastructure is, they're building the street to make sure that the center median transit way is easy to construct and that right of way is available. So Three Roots is doing that, and then the Stone Creek is going to do that, and that's critical to the implementation. It's still probably going to take a decade, but that component is there. So beyond that, it's really up to the voters of San Diego to vote for the future ballot initiative to provide additional funding. There may be some federal money with this new bill that's being passed, so we're always looking for that.
Well, with all due respect, just to comment, it seems like the existing heavily populated area right now, in the area where some of these malls and the senior mobile home facility are targeted for potential redevelopment, are the areas where you have not added transit and you have not added the Fred type electrical. I'd really like to see you reconsider that.
Mm-hmm. Noted.
Okay, so I've got a question for you, Alex. I had emailed this to you, but the among the recreational value points that are in the draft plan, you have 3,200 points for the 4 village areas, but those were basically just calculated off of an estimated population. What would those? How real are those? What would they do to get the recreational value points that you're talking about?
So in the recreational value point, our park planner had assumed 50% of the points would be met in those future urban village areas through redevelopment. So that's where the points come from. It's predicated on, redevelopment happening. Some of these sites have 20-year lease. But we wanted to make sure new park facilities are built as part of redevelopment. And so that's what's in the plan right now.
So then if someone comes along and they want to do one of these redevelopment projects in one of the village areas, they would be required to find some way to put in that many recreational value points. Is that the way it works?
Correct. And go through the GDP process as part of their development.
Okay. Joe, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I think it would help if we could get a list from the city that would identify what these value points are for the recreation. I know you get a certain amount of points for putting in a drinking fountain. You get a certain amount of points for putting in a tree. So I think if we could get a list of what those points equal, I think would give people a better idea of what we're facing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can send you, I think it's in the park master plan and appendix, the point system and kind of the explanation.
There is there is a table in the draft community plan volume 2 that does actually list that for Mira Mesa parks.
Mm-hmm.
So you should probably look at that. That's why I was asking about the recreational value points for the village areas. That's where that came from. Brandon Maddox, I don't think I know you, but I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, newbie here. I was on the last one. I had a question to following up yours, Jeff, is regarding the private parks developments. If a private individual tends to go above and beyond what is required to meet the requirements, is there any sort of benefits to that? Say someone wants to install a basketball court that's open to the public. What type of benefits would be provided to that private developer, if any?
Yeah, I can answer that. So the benefit of on-site park development is that the developer does not have to pay the park fee, 90% of the park fee, basically. So it's quite a savings for residential builders that instead of paying the fee, they can just build the park on site, whether it's basketball court or other park facility. So that's the incentive, I guess, and to make sure rather than the fee going to citywide pot of money and community not seeing that, at least not right away.
And with the new mixed use component, is that just residential, or would that be considered commercial too?
Mixed use residential, any residential component would be the requirement. So pure commercial project would not be required to build a park.
Correct. But back to the question, if they do that, is there any sort of benefits? Because we're trying to find parks, try to find basketball courts, private individuals with money, if they do that.
There could be fee reimbursement, as part of the development impact fee reimbursement potentially, but we don't have anything in the plan right now that, would create that incentive for non-residential projects. So I'm definitely open to any ideas, whether it's a policy or a supplemental development regulation. that we could include to incentivize non-residential.
I'm looking at the community too, asking you guys if that's something you'd be interested in, but as a private developer, I think, you know, it's something that you can look at. Everyone's looking for some sort of benefits when they develop a site, and with these large campuses coming online that are, you know, open and available around Sorrento Valley and Sorrento Mesa. It's an opportunity, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a thought. I mean, you know, we did this search for little pieces of land here and there, which might or might not work. But if you can actually find a private landowner who is willing to make, you know, make park facilities and make them open to the public, that might be another way to do that. Justin, you have your hand up?
Yeah, this is something that I think this is a great idea, Brandon. It's something that was kind of discussed a couple meetings ago, which is to actually go and purchase land from private landowners dedicated to the city. So there's a whole I guess spectrum, right? There could be that private landowner still controls that land and the city rents it out as a park, and there's some sort of agreement for 10 years. So then it becomes a public-private kind of partnership where you're renting out space. It's no different from renting out space to a tenant, except now it's outdoors in your parking lot. So, you know, there could be some sort of program where the city says, you know what, we're going to reduce your parking requirements. And now you can take an area in your parking lot where you don't use 20 parking spots and it's a basketball court for the community to use. So it's a great idea, but this is a way to get creative to use some of this land that's underutilized. And there are some properties that are not using all of their parking. No question. Of course, there are properties that are using too much parking and they're parking their cars in the street as well. That's another issue. But as mobility changes and as this mobility plan is implemented, and I know it's going to take a lot of time, this is something to consider long term, that maybe there's some sort of creative way to start using some of those parking lots. I mean, you know, Miramar is covered in parking lots. So of course, some of these buildings are underparked, like I said, so there are issues there as well, but there are definitely some buildings that aren't using all of their land.
But one thing I'd say to kind of the parking, reducing parking. Parking is really a market driver, right? Tenants, they require parking. If something's underutilized, like you stated, absolutely. But you know, what speaks a lot is money. So tax benefits and reducing of such, I think, is also a good idea. But that point, and I agree with Justin.
Okay. So just one last question I did have in my list of questions for you. You know, the traffic study really does show congestion being pretty awful on Mira Mesa Boulevard and Miramar Road. And then you have the mobility board saying slow it down more. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. But, you know, we did discuss some options for doing that. They're all expensive. You could use reversible lanes. You could make part of Mira Mesa Boulevard go underground. You know, all sorts of wild ideas we talked about at the beginning. But do we have anything that can make that projection in the traffic study not come true?
Well, so the limitation of the mobility modeling, right, that we used didn't incorporate work from home, for example, and it didn't incorporate the proposed transit, not all the transit improvements, you know, in the regional plan, which would have additional benefits that's not showing in the model results. So those are just caveats. But I think in terms of vehicular congestion, with the city recently passing the updated climate action plan and this focus on alternative modes of travel, walking, biking, rolling, and transit, and just having a more, competitive transportation option is a priority. And the state of California has shifted from vehicular delay to vehicle miles traveled to better address all transportation modes. And so, these are some of the changes at the state level, but also regionally and locally, and prioritization, I guess. So yeah, that's, I guess, a two-part answer to your question about the projected congestions in certain intersections.
Yeah, the vehicle miles traveled doesn't help us much when we're driving on the road, unfortunately. It's a
Mhm.
planning tool, but that's not what we feel, so. So I see Peter Shearer has his hand up.
Hey, thanks for calling on me. So a question on this topic, Alex, you mentioned that work from home is not captured in Series 13 or Series 14. Has the city done any recent traffic calculations, both at intersections and segments in the planning area to understand current conditions versus those projected in the model?
Yeah, so Series 13, traffic model is what we had used for the Mira Mesa community plan update. The Series 14 model was not available.
Okay.
It was not available until the regional plan was adopted. So that's the issue, and I believe work from home is incorporated into the Series 14 traffic model. It's just the nature of the planning. There's always new data and new forecasts coming out, and I believe Series 15 is coming out soon.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the
And understanding that, this is a projection and that's what a model is. It's just best guess of what future condition looks like. But have we as a city, done any recent studies as to how accurate the model is compared to current conditions? Because we've had this seismic shock of work from home.
I believe as part of the citywide, the Blueprint Initiative, city is looking at newer models.
Okay, yeah, I'd be curious the timing of that and if that's something that would be available, information would be available prior to, this plan being finalized. Obviously, from a traffic congestion standpoint, this has been nothing but good news. And I think, we have seen that in certain key intersections in this area. So it would maybe be helpful for the messaging as we think about traffic delays and level of service ratings for intersections and segments in this area to understand not just what the model says, but what reality is today. I think that might help on your side too, Alex.
Yeah.
Hey, and then just one other thought while I'm on a hot mic, which is going back to Brandon's previous comment. It's a really interesting thought. But my question, Alex, is, what you said at the beginning, which is, hey, as everyone has mentioned, why can't we just show where more parks will be? Well, the big issue there is acquiring land and it's expensive. So what's the thought process on the 90% reimbursement to those who build parks on site? Noting that if the economics were such that the reimbursement was compelling, then developers would be selling their land to you for free. I mean, they would be signing up to sell their land to you for the fee, but that doesn't happen. And I'm here to say that's because the fee reimbursement is a small fraction, unfortunately, of what it actually costs to both acquire, air quotes there, the land on your site and then build the park. So what was the logic or what was the reasoning behind 90% versus 100%? I mean, it sounds like from the group here today, the most important thing is getting parks built. And so to incentivize developers to do that, I think, the more fee that could be paid, you could potentially go in excess of 100%. So what's the thought process there?
Then, so the 90% is, I believe it's from the park master plan and the Nexus study that they had done. So it's not really part of the community plan update. Yeah, so I can't answer beyond that on what all the rationale and what the study entailed for that fee reimbursement.
So Jeff and Jeffrey and team who sit on the advisory board here, you know, as a developer and friend of the community, I would say, you know, to the extent that that parks are what are important to this group, you know, that could be an avenue to get that. It sounds like a developer asking for handouts, but I can promise you, like Brandon mentioned at the end of his comment, is this comes down to dollars and cents for us. And so if it's parking that someone could potentially sign a lease on, or a park that the city is going to credit you development fees on, it's really just a simple calculation of which one is a higher and better use and what's required of the project. So to the extent that we decide we want more parks, you know, changing that 90% number could be an incentive that's meaningful to developers.
Okay, so Alex, I'm not familiar with this 90% number. Where is that? That's in the Parks Master Plan, you say?
Yes, so if a developer builds parks on site, then they don't have to pay the 90% of the fees. I don't know why they still have to pay the 10%, but it becomes a substantial amount. I think a 300 unit housing development, for example, and I think it's like $1 million plus in fees. This is just general ballpark. So, you know, 900,000 off of that is what's been communicated to me.
Okay. Okay, so I have one last question for you, Alex. This is a little off the topic we've had with other for the rest of the session, but it's something that's come up with some of the landowners. Given the changes in zoning you're doing throughout the community, does it restrict the landowners in any way more than they currently are? That is there anything, if they want to do anything under the current community plan, can they do it, or are there things that once this is adopted, they're not going to be able to do?
So the current property owners, there's a mechanism in the land development code called previously conforming. So to be able to, you know, use the previous zoning land use if there is a desire. So that mechanism is available with the new plan. Well, so that's the answer to your question.
Okay. All right, are there any more questions? Okay, well, this didn't actually go on for an hour and a half. Went on for an hour and 3 minutes. So you guys can take a break and we will reconvene back here at 7 o'clock.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you all.